Welcome to Behind the Smile with Ash Butters, a podcast designed to reveal the truth behind the masks we wear. Together, we look to demystify the human mind and its behaviours in relation to mental health, trauma and addiction. My name's Ash and I'll be your host as we uncover the real stories of people's pain and the steps they've taken to live a life of freedom in recovery. From sobriety to spirituality, join me each week as we uncover the reasons why people seek recovery and how their lives have changed by living one day at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Dani Carr. Dani is a trauma-informed sobriety coach who recently completed her compassionate inquiry training with Dr. Gabor Mate and is also the creator and host of the podcast, How I Quit Alcohol. Dani, along with her husband Ash, made the decision to quit drinking in January 2018, which means she recently celebrated 5 years of sobriety. Now, I'm a big fan of Dani's and the incredible work that she's doing within the sober space. So it's an honour to invite her onto the show today. And with that, Dani, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you?
Hi, Ash. Thank you so much for that beautiful intro and thank you for having me on today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. It's so nice to meet you and engage with you. How I Quit Alcohol was one of the first sobriety podcasts that I'd ever listened to, and I became a huge fan from the outset. So thank you so much for all the work you do and that you continue to do. It's just amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad you liked it. That's great.
Now, it's the start of 2023 and you've just turned 5 in recovery years. How was your Christmas and New Year period?
It was amazing. I loved it. It was wow, 5 years. That's half a decade. Ash and I just can't even believe it. It just never seemed possible at the time. And it's interesting, you still have to navigate family, you have to navigate friends at that time of year, which can be super triggering and emotional and all those things. And you don't have the alcohol to numb that out. And so that's always interesting. But, I feel equipped to be able to handle what shows up. And we're just really proud of ourselves, honestly. And we just feel amazing. Our New Year's was spent with my beautiful sister at her home in Kinglake. And she'd set up the most beautiful thing out on her deck with Moroccan rugs and cushions. And we had beautiful food and talked about what we wanted to bring into the new year. And it was just beautiful. I love it so much. I love being sober. I love it.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. And we'll dive into a lot more about what you were just touching on then about that really authentic connection and the ability to be present with friends and family when you are sober. But before we dive into the juicy stuff, I'd love for our listeners to have the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So may we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself. Let's do where you live and who you live with, what an average day looks like, and what are your hobbies?
Okay, awesome. Well, I live in the Northern Rivers, so we're about 20 minutes north of Byron Bay, down at a little kind of beachside village called New Brighton, and it's really beautiful. And I live with 2 daughters, Sunny and Aria. Sunny's 14, Aria's 9, and my beautiful husband Ash Grunwald. He's a musician, and our dog, our beagle, his name's Reginald. And my hobbies are really self-improvement. I really love all things wellness, and my hobby is walking and probably the sunrise. I love watching the sunrise every day. It's something I really, really love doing. And cooking. I love cooking and eating pasta, which is not so good for the ass, but I love it. I love it.
And I imagine catching the sunrise, you probably did that a lot in your drinking days, but you weren't really present to actually take it all in, right?
At the other end.
Exactly.
Really scattered, shattered and coming down and just wow, there's the sunrise. And it's a very different experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. And is the self-development something that you were drawn to in recovery as well, or were you interested in that prior to?
I was a little bit prior to. I've always liked doing yoga and things like that. Couldn't stand meditation, would actually make me angry. There's a whole story around that. But Yeah, I was always interested in it, but as I got sober and took alcohol out of my life, I started to replace it with wellness, and I really binged on wellness. I kind of made that my hobby and something to really sink my teeth into. I really think that in recovery or taking alcohol out of your life, because it's so big, alcohol is such a big part of our lives, it needs to be replaced with something just as big. My good friend Lissy Turner, who's an amazing yoga teacher and therapist, I remember her saying that taking out something that large needs to be replaced with something that large. And yeah, I thought that was beautiful advice.
Absolutely. That's been a really similar experience for myself. At 1 year sober, I ended up going and doing my yoga teacher training because it was a practice that I'd always been drawn to when I was still drinking, but I didn't have the capacity to really connect and I think get the full benefits of a practice like yoga, and then which leads into meditation and that heightened self-awareness. And so there's just all of these different things. There's things that you don't even know about yourself until you put the drink down that all of a sudden are revealed to you. It's amazing.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a process of getting to know yourself. But also in terms of yoga, when I would do it back then was very much just about the poses or trying to get toned or flexible. And now obviously realizing that it's so much more than that. And the poses are only such a small part of what yoga is all about. And so, yeah, it's been beautiful. The whole journey is beautiful and still continuing to learn new things and all the time.
That's the best part, isn't it? Yeah, every year gets better and better.
Absolutely.
Now, Danny, I've asked you to bring in a photo with you today, and it's a photo from a time in your life where you are hiding behind a smile. So you were projecting one version of yourself to the world, but the reality was you were struggling on the inside. Can you describe for our listeners the photo that you've chosen and what was going on for you at that time?
Well, I picked out a photo from a time when Ash and I were at the airport. We were going on an international flight. It was probably about 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe earlier, and we were drinking beers and we've got on our sunnies. And I remember I was saying to you, Ash, that I posted this particular photo on my personal Instagram thinking that it looked really cool, that we looked really rock and roll. And I think probably made some kind of caption like, living our best life or something like that. Ha ha. And it's funny because just looking at that photo now and showing you that photo now, I'm like, oh, wow, like those people, they weren't living their best life. They were so far from it. And I guess there was a lot of, in my life, if I'm to be honest, projecting this kind of rock and roll lifestyle, this, music and everything that comes along with it as being super cool. But there's such a dark side to it. And that's part of it, rocking up to the airport, sculling beers on a hangover, thinking that was cool. And I'm not judging people who are in that state now, but for me, looking back on it now, I feel sad for both those people in that photo. And I feel like they weren't living their best life.
It's amazing how we get this shift in perspective. At the time, you don't know what you don't know, right? So that's why I think it can be so difficult to stop, because you get used to the constant hangovers. You get used to top-up drinking. It progresses and it evolves, and one day you wake up and you might have ended up being a daily drinker, but you certainly don't start that way. I think that's the power that alcohol has, and it's almost this delusion that we create around the behaviors and what's actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I realize now, looking back and in hindsight, that I was sort of, it's so rock and roll and all the rest of it, but I had no self-confidence. Hanging around with celebrities or, other well-known musicians and things like that, that was my way of making myself feel confident or good enough to be around those people, where at the time, deep down, I probably didn't think I was good enough or worthy or cool enough. And so I was really masking that rather than actually being with that feeling that was there for me. And so it would lead to some serious binge drinking because I felt so uncomfortable. Then I guess that escalated into, starting to drink on my own at home. I wasn't a daily drinker, but I was maybe heading that way. Big binges, big blackouts. And it was just like, oh my God, I'm at a party or I'm with these people, glug, 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 really quickly. And then you know how it goes. You wake up the next morning, what the hell happened? Fuck, what did I do? Oh my God, how embarrassing. And then you're right back to where you started. You're your self-confidence is diminished even more. It took a while to put all that together to understand that. Yeah.
It is. It's a cycle. I'd love to take a step back now. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood? What was Danny as a little girl like?
So my childhood was, mostly great. I grew up on the outskirts of Melbourne in Eltham, and then we moved to central Victoria. I was very, very close with my dad. I was a tomboy, so I rode horses and built fences with him, go out shooting rabbits. I'm vegetarian now, so I can't even believe I did that. My mum is an addict, not really alcohol, but more so prescription drugs. And that impacted me quite a lot. And I didn't realize how much until I started doing work on myself. And growing up with one parent that was very up and down, like extreme, really beautiful, loving one moment, then the next quite cold and or passed out or in hospital or not there. And so that was interesting, navigating that and learning, I don't know, just to survive around that was interesting. Like I say, though, mostly it was good, but growing up in a small country town, there wasn't much to do. And again, I was a kid, I was shy. I was so bloody shy and self-conscious. I was a bit chubby and red hair. And I just thought that I was a bit gross and really not confident. I think that comes with having a parent that's up and down and up and down. And so we started drinking at 13, binge drinking at 13. And I was like, wow, this feels good. This feels good. I feel accepted. I can be this sort of person. I don't have to worry about being not confident. I didn't realize that that's what was happening. And then it just started from there. It's just like every single weekend, me and my girlfriends and other friends, that's what we did. And I mean, every weekend. And, yeah.
Can you talk to me about what you felt when you drank alcohol? So what was the experience that you had and what was your behavior like when you were drinking? Because there's all different types of drinkers. So how did it sort of manifest and play out in you?
Yeah, for me, I'd kind of get pretty moody. Like if I would drink beer, I'd get really angry, be really confrontational, mouthy. Yeah, just get into a lot of arguments. There's the part of me which would be really fun-loving to a point, and then you get to a certain point or a certain level of drunkenness that you kind of go over the edge. It would differ from time to time. So sometimes it was fun-loving and having a great time. Other times it was super emotional and crying and, it showed up different times depending on what I drank. But definitely as it progressed and as I got worse, as I got older, it was more, just huge blackouts. So, just being a dick.
Yeah.
Just being a total dick.
I can so relate.
Loud, mouthy, talking over everyone, repeaty. Ugh.
I know, it makes you cringe when you look back, doesn't it?
Yeah, it made me cringe then, but I didn't stop.
That's it. Yeah. So you started drinking at 13 and it was binge drinking, heavy drinking from the outset in almost like a weekly sort of cycle.
Yeah.
That, I'm assuming, carried on for your entire period of schooling. And then when you finished school and you sort of stepped into adulthood, how did alcohol play a role in your life then?
Yeah, well, it's sort of, we stopped with the spumante and the cask wine and then went on to bottled wine with corks and suddenly started to feel a bit more sophisticated. And so it changed a bit in that way, where you suddenly start to feel like you're a grown up and this is sophisticated. And then, getting into fine wines, getting into our late 20s and as you get more money and all the rest of it. But it's still the same poison.
Did you find that alcohol was starting to impact your ability to do things like show up for work or your relationships? Were there any negative impacts at this stage or were they later down the track?
In my 20s, Ash and I got together when we were 24. It was impacting our relationship in terms of, fighting or jealousy, those out of control emotions that you just don't know how to deal with at that age. Yeah, so it would definitely affect that. Yeah, I'd all the time, like not show up for work because I was too hungover. I have to take sick days all the time. When I was younger, like my early 20s, around like 20, 21, I worked in a catering company in the city cooking. and prep, food prep, and he'd have to get up at 4 a.m. And so many times I would turn up there still wasted, you know, just because I'd been out partying the night before, still high, or not turn up at all.
Yeah. You get away with it though at that age, don't you? I remember doing the same sort of thing and getting through the day somehow. And then as I got older, around sort of my late 20s, early 30s, I just couldn't do it anymore. I actually physically couldn't show up, and the hangovers would be debilitating. You'd be bedridden. And I think that's what made the insanity of then drinking again the following day or even a few days after. That's what really highlighted that insanity, where it was taking so much more than it was giving.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And yet, you keep going back to it. So, Dani, I've heard you talk before about the spiral of addiction where, just like we said, you'll swear off drinking forever and then within a few days you're drinking again. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how that played out for you?
Oh my God, like every couple of weeks, that would be the cycle for me. So having this huge night, maybe acting like a dick, doing something embarrassing, or just feeling so bad, like anxiety and being sick, physically sick, that you'd say, no, that's it. I'm not doing it anymore. That's it. I'm really stopping. Particularly if you'd really fucked up. Like if you'd really behaved really, really badly, that would be like, no, that's it. I'm not doing it ever again. And you get that amnesia, right? Where you're like, after about 3 days, I'll just have one. Let's have one and see how that feels. And of course, you know how that ends. And it might be one that time, but then a couple of days later, you're right back there and you're binging again. And you're like, oh my God, I've done it again.
I completely know what you mean. Have you read, there's a book by William Porter called Alcohol Explained, and he describes that same behavioral pattern. He describes it as a thing called the fading effect bias, where the more distance we have from a memory, the more we start to romanticize it, which is why the day after, when you're filled with that guilt, shame, and remorse, you swear off something forever. And then depending on how reliant you are on alcohol, you may not even get through the day, or maybe you'll get through a few days or even a few weeks. But over time, you start to think, maybe that was an overreaction. Maybe it really wasn't that bad. And then, like you said, you're straight back into it again.
Yeah, it seems to happen that way, doesn't it? It's just like we just forget and it fades and it loses that intensity.
And the other thing that I'm amazed about as I speak to different people on the podcast, in real life, is that we all share this similar experience. Neither of us are unique in our relationship in the way that alcohol took over and had control of our lives, even though, we're from different parts of the country, we've lived very different lives. It amazes me every time how we share these similarities.
I find it really fascinating too, particularly with working with people. It's like it doesn't discriminate. It absolutely does not discriminate. You can get anyone, and it doesn't matter what your background or what your wealth status is or how many followers you've got on Instagram. It completely doesn't discriminate. And that's the same, not just with alcohol, but really any addiction. Yeah.
That's so, so true. Yeah. So, Dani, congratulations on 5 years of sobriety. That is amazing. You celebrated that just a couple of weeks ago now. Yeah. What was the catalyst that led you to your decision to give up alcohol for good?
Yeah, I think by that stage, getting towards the end of it, it was just the blackouts, like not remembering, my girls, particularly Sunny, our eldest, was starting to see some pretty ordinary behaviour. Not remembering if I'd fed them or put them to bed, not remembering whole sections of the evening. It was really quite terrifying too, when you have to kind of, when you wake up and you're like, oh my God, particularly when you've got kids and you're like, fuck, did I feed them? Are they in bed? Are they safe? And then looking for evidence that I'd brushed their teeth or that my little one Aria had a nappy on. Like, just that's horrifying as a parent, or at least it was for me. And then our relationship was suffering. There was fights and it was affecting everything. My business, I run a business called Earth Bottles, and that was being affected. It was affecting my health, my weight, everything, and mostly my self-esteem. And I knew that if I kept waking up and hating on myself, I'm not stupid. I know that if I keep this up and it's not changing, like even though I'd say, that's it, I'm done, I knew something really had to change. And then there was one final big blackout where I've talked about it, quite a bit publicly, but where I made plans to look after my friends' children and my children. And we were living in Bali, we were meeting at a restaurant to take her kids back so that they could go out for dinner back to my villa. So I was going to take them home. We ended up having double vodkas, and I just got shit-faced at this lunch when I'm meant to be taking these kids home with my kids so that the parents could go out. And what I remember is being in the taxi and then getting out and throwing up all over myself and, getting ushered inside, and then my daughter having to hold my hair back while I was vomiting. And I think I passed out, and then I woke up at about 11 o'clock, and my friends whose kids I was meant to be looking after outside by the pool, having their own little party, I guess. But just the embarrassment, Ash, I was just like, I didn't even want to go outside. I didn't want to face them. I felt like, I just felt just like a loser and a failure and so embarrassed and ashamed. I thought, this is shit. And not only that, my daughter saw it all, and how's she going to feel about that? And I thought about my own childhood then at that point and thought, I know what it's like to not be able to trust a parent, and I know what it's like to feel that lack of safety, I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And so I thought, something has to change. I have to change this. And so my best friend Lisa said to me a few weeks later, she just rang me out of the blue and said, I'm going to take a year off alcohol. And her and I had always drunk together. Our drink dial her a lot. And I said, you know what? I'm doing it as well. And at this point too, I was thinking about leaving my relationship. And I thought, if I have a year off alcohol, I'll have that clarity at the end to decide what I'm going to do. It's such a big decision. I need to have that clarity. So that was another reason. And then Ash joined in, my husband, a few other people joined in, and we made a group out of it and just got stuck in for that year. And then at the end, obviously the changes happened and our relationship improved, and my relationship with myself changed and improved. And we decided at the end of it, that's it, I'm not going back. So it was really those key events that sort of happened towards the end. But in all honesty, things like that had been happening throughout the years anyway, where I'd wake up and go, oh my fucking God, what happened? And I just couldn't believe it. And just some terrifying stuff too, just waking up. I remember being in Belgium, got shit-faced, took the kids back to the hotel, couldn't remember any of it. I woke up panicked, just like, oh my God, where are the kids? Oh my God. Thank God they were in bed with me, but I don't even remember getting back to the hotel with the kids.
Yeah.
Anything could have happened. It makes me feel sick now thinking about it. It wasn't worth it for me anymore. You know how you said that earlier? Just, you got to weigh it up and just think, is this actually worth it for me anymore? And it just wasn't.
I love what you shared just then about how in such a short period, because really 12 months in the grand scheme of our lives is such a short period of time, you had so many profound changes. Number one being that you were able to repair your relationship and want to stay there. Number two, that you started this journey of self-discovery. These are things that I think that they're benefits that people may not even realize, because a lot of the time people stop drinking because they want the consequences to stop. The blackouts that we've just been talking about, the behaviors, they want those to stop. But what's really, really cool is all of the awakening that we're exposed to on the other side.
Yeah. And I think that there's a difference. They talk about dry drunks, the people that just stop and abstain and that's it. They don't do any work on themselves. And I really believe this whole journey is about the deeper work. It's not so much even about the alcohol. It's really getting honest with yourself and getting into a relationship with yourself and your feelings that show up. And alcohol became such a small component really of it. It was more about this journey of, discovering myself, without sort of sound like a wanker there, but really getting in tune with and understanding myself and being able to sit with myself and liking who I am. I couldn't stand myself. And then suddenly I was like, you're not too bad. You're okay. So, I think it's definitely more about that, what's on the other side and all the discoveries that we make, that when we have that space, when we're not clouded by alcohol, when we can be in conversation with people or hang out with people that don't drink, that would have, before I would have thought boring. They're my favorite people now. And we have such rich and beautiful conversations and fun. Like when we laugh, we're really laughing about something that's proper funny, not just because someone's acting like a dick.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes, my dad is in recovery, and I remember there was about a decade there where I was really, really struggling, but I still wasn't ready to let go and surrender completely.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, we would have these conversations, and I remember him saying to me one day, Ash, the relationships and the friendships that you will form in sobriety will be the deepest and richest relationships you've ever experienced. And he said to me, and I remember this so vividly, he said, you will laugh like you've never laughed before. And that real belly laughing where you get the stitches and you wake up the next morning with sore abs. And that is exactly the experience that I get these days when I hang out with my sober mates. It's just pure joy and so funny.
It's just that connection. It's just that real connected good time that you have, and you wake up the next day and you don't have regret and shame and embarrassment and remorse, but you just feel that warmth of like, that was a beautiful, beautiful night. And not all my friends are teetotalers either. Like there's some friends that just have a few drinks. I don't necessarily gravitate towards people that are getting really smashed anymore. I can go to a party like that, but I usually leave pretty early once it starts to get a bit pear-shaped. But my friends, probably most of my friends now, they're not very big drinkers, or it's not the main focus of the night anymore.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but drugs were a part of my story. And I used to think that doing cocaine and getting into a D&M with someone in the corner of a club or a party was really deep, raw connection.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you remember I remember going to this nightclub called Market on Commercial Road in Melbourne and, putting 4 Eckies up my bum and then having these conversations like, I love this person. I love this person so much. They're never leaving my life. And then even if they sort of come back to your place and you're not hanging out, you're like, you kind of sober up and you're like, oh, I've got nothing in common. Or you may never see that person again. And it's just like, you feel like there's this deep connection. And same as like just with booze, you feel like I need it to get a level deeper, but you actually don't. Once you can get through your own discomfort perhaps, and then you can really get into a really good conversation. It's so much better. And it doesn't have to go for as long too. You know how when you're drinking, it's like the session goes all night. Now, probably I wouldn't really sit on my deck with anyone until 2:00 in the morning anymore, but it's probably shorter, but more condensed and more meaningful. Quality. It's
quality over quantity. Yeah.
Someone else was actually Michelle McDonald, her name is. She's in my grads group. She's done my course and she's now going on to be a sober coach. But she was saying, she did a post recently and she said, you've got no idea the connections you're going to end up having. Something like that. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful thing and it's so true. Especially at the start when you can feel a bit lonely, particularly if you've had a lot of friends that are big drinkers and that's been your social circle, you can feel quite isolated and lonely for a bit. And, I just think just hang on, because your people, they'll come, even if it takes a while, they will come, and they do come. It just takes a little bit of time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When I got sober, I came out of rehab and we went into lockdown, I think a week later. And so I really struggled to form friendships or relationships with people that were sober for that first 12 months. But just as you said, if you hold on, it does come. It does eventually happen. And then right before your eyes, the people that you're spending more time with, everything starts to shift and change. And again, this is a lifelong journey. So it's something that continues to evolve and grow as you evolve and grow. And I think it's really important to find people that want to grow with you as well.
Oh, totally, 100%. And people that will just accept the changes in you, because you do change a lot and you want to be able to accept that yourself, but have people in your life that will accept those changes and grow with you or let you grow.
So what's some advice that you would have for somebody who is in early sobriety, who's experiencing that loneliness at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think that, remembering that it will come and really getting into a good relationship with yourself. Like I had to spend a lot of time on my own because my husband's away touring all the time. And so it would be me at home on my own with the kids a lot. So rather than trying to avoid myself with Netflix or, I would just sort of sit and be and do a bit of journaling or do a bit of yoga, maybe go for a quiet walk, and just really learning to be in relationship with myself and, like hanging out with myself. And now I love it. Before I couldn't even go for a walk on the beach without texting a whole lot of people to see who could come. And now I can't think when someone wants to come on my morning walk with me, I'm like, oh no, I don't want anyone there. I really enjoy that time. So honestly, I can't believe that is me, because I was so needy of other people, and now I'm not. So it's a slow process, right? But you will feel loneliness, and that's okay. It's not, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's something that you can lean into perhaps and explore a little bit. What's it like for me to be lonely? What does it mean for me to be lonely? What do I make that mean about myself?
As you were talking just then, it made me think of what I believe has probably something that a lot of people experience, and it's what I've now realized is a mistruth about myself, is that when I was drinking, I thought that I was really extroverted.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And yes, and then all of a sudden you get sober and it's like, oh no, I think I'm an introvert.
Yeah. Oh, I think most people, maybe apart from 2 people that I work with that I've coached, we're actually all introverted. And I remember having that same realization of like, oh my God, I'm an introvert. And I always thought I was this big, loud life of the party. And no, it wasn't. And most binge drinkers or daily drinkers are actually introverted. And introverts need time on their own. They need to fill their own cup, so to speak, by solitude and perhaps meditation or just quiet, like silence. And it's really interesting, isn't it? You're like, wow. And then once you know that about yourself too, you can show up differently. You understand that after being around a big group, you can feel drained and that you do need that time. So you can kind of self-medicate, so to speak, in that way and really care for yourself, or know that, I'm going to go to this party and I'm going to feel uncomfortable because I'm actually an introvert, and that's okay.
And you learn for the first time to implement healthy boundaries. Yeah. So maybe it's like, hey, yes, I'll come to the party, but I'm going to get there on time and I'm going to leave early because that's what I need to self-soothe and nurture myself and be able to show up the next day.
I think that's so important in early sobriety as well, just to always let people know, yes, I will come, but I'm not going to be there for long. And if they don't like it, then they don't have to accept, you don't have to go. I'm really clear with that. Yeah, I'll come, but I'll be gone by 8 o'clock. I think it's really important.
I completely agree. So early recovery is, I think, a really challenging time for anybody. What are some of the tools and techniques that you implemented in that first 12 months to help you navigate sobriety?
That's a great question. So for me, I remember waking up on New Year's Day and going, oh shit, what have I done? Because I told everyone. That's the other thing. I told everyone.
That's great though, right? Because you're accountable.
Being accountable, exactly. And within a couple of weeks, I was hating it. I really hated it. I was like, oh my God, this is boring. I'm boring. Oh my God, how can I do this for a year? And I really didn't like it. And I thought, okay, Danny, this has to change because I'm doing this for 12 months and I don't want to hate it the whole time. So I realized pretty quickly that I had to change my mindset. So Ash and myself and our other little group, we worked really hard on like starting a gratitude practice. And just from things I'd read and heard and picked up on, I thought, well, I've heard that's pretty good. So I'm going to try a gratitude practice. And so I started with just writing 3 things that I was grateful for every day. And I bookended my day with that as well. So what had gone well in the day. And just starting to scan for what I was grateful for. Then I also, and I do this to this day, and this is one of the first things I give to people that I'm coaching, is to wake up in the morning and congratulate myself, tell myself well done, because I was so habituated to like wake up and go, oh, you idiot, oh my God, what have you done? And starting that negative self-talk. And then from there worked really, really hard on my negative self-talk. So I noticed every time that my inner critic would show up or the negative self-talk would start, I would try and counteract that with a more positive thought or a more helpful thought, or just simply push the thought away. That was really helpful. It changed everything. So when you've gone from this full-blown negative, anxiety-ridden, I was an insomniac, I couldn't, because I'd ruminate on things so much. And once I started to change that way of thinking, and then I started to enjoy the process more. And the more that I woke up and congratulated myself on getting through another day or another weekend without it, I started to feel differently and like, this is actually really good and I'm feeling really good. So those things worked really well. And then journaling about, I call them my musts. So things that really basic, small things that I would bring into my day that would help me feel accomplished. So even if it was 10 squats or make my bed or drink 2 liters of water, like really basic things that were easy to achieve, rather than I'll do 20K walk or run or something like that, which isn't really achievable. But so those daily things, that helped. And then I just started to research a bit of the, like, positive affirmations. And I heard this really great, he's a preacher. I'm not religious. His name's Joel Osteen. And I heard him through the Oprah Super Soul Conversations, whatever her podcast. And he said, whatever follows the words I am will come looking for you. So if we're walking,
I love that.
Yeah, if I'm a loser, I'm so tired, I'm so fat, I'm so this, I'm so ugly, I'm so blah, blah, that's what's going to come and show up in your life. And I really got into that concept. I thought, wow, that's really cool. So I started, and Ash did as well, writing down, I'm proud of myself. I'm achieving my goals. I am sober. I'm living an amazing alcohol-free life. So all those things, while they sound a bit cheesy, really worked, and that all compounds on itself. So I was very much into that. I just binged out on it, seriously, on this really positive mindset. And I know some people are like, toxic positivity. I don't believe that. To a degree, I do think you don't want the toxic positivity, but bringing in more and more positivity is a great thing, especially if you're so wired to that negativity bias, which we are all as humans, but I was really bad. So changing that. And there's lots of things we worked on. They're the kind of main things.
And everything you've described there, all of those different practices are a way of rewiring those neural pathways. So every day you implement that positive behavior, over time that becomes your natural default.
Yeah.
And, a happy, contented person doesn't put poison down their throat every day. It's just simple.
I know, and you make good choices for yourself. As soon as you start speaking to yourself in a kind way, I think everything changes. And I remember Ash once standing, I hated mirrors, towards the end of my drinking. I just was so down on myself. I couldn't look in the mirror. And so one day I was like, you know what, I'm going to stand in front of the mirror and be there with myself. And I stood naked in front of the mirror. And normally, I'd pick the shit out of myself, or my boobs are too saggy, or, got fat here on the sides or whatever. But I just stood there and started to think, I accept you as you are, and you've got legs that have got dimples and cellulite and they touch at the top, but that's okay because they're legs that work. And I know this could sound a bit wanky, but how blessed am I to have 2 legs that work? I'm not in a wheelchair. I have feet, they carry, and to be grateful and have gratitude for my body and for my boobs that fed my kids that's super saggy, but they don't. My sister had just been through breast cancer. I'm like, wow, they don't have cancer. They're not as perky as what I want them to be, but they're cancer free. They fed my kids. This makes me emotional because it's big work. It's that self-acceptance and stopping this bullshit inner critic that starts and that we get fed on social media and people around us sometimes. It's hard work. But it was the most beneficial work I've done. And I very rarely speak to myself in a critical way anymore.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think that inner critic developed as a result of growing up in an environment where there was so much unpredictability and unsafety, and perhaps a core belief that, I'm not enough, or I need to be this to make you happy?
Yeah, I think So although my parents were very, even though mum had addiction problems, she was very much, you can do anything, and she was very uplifting and quite loving. But I also grew up in a split family situation. So I'm one of six, but I'm actually the only child of my parents. So I never quite felt like I fitted in. I so desperately wanted my siblings to love me or feel connected to me like they did each other. It was sort of, I felt like they had, so my dad had his kids, my mum had her kids, and I felt like it was very much us and them. But that was something I'd projected and made up myself. Like I have beautiful relationships with them, and they all say them, and they've always told me, you are our sister, you're our sister. But I felt not good. I didn't feel quite that. So I think that, and that was something, I don't know, that just ruminated. That's something that I grew in my own head. And so being accepted by people was really important to me, or to feel important. And I think that drove a lot of my drinking, really, was to be accepted or to fit in or to feel part of it. I think a lot of it started from that. And then of course you've got self-esteem issues. Having an addicted parent is hard.
And with the behavior of it, when we then try and self-medicate with alcohol or drugs, we have this shitty behavior where we do things that shatter our self-esteem. So it's compounding.
Just like I said, like those behaviors that we wake up and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? And then you just hate yourself even more, and your self-esteem goes down the toilet even more, and your confidence is shattered.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I was actually writing my gratitude list this morning, and on my gratitude list I said, I'm grateful that I know I haven't harmed anyone this week.
Oh,
and that's a gift of sobriety, right? I used to wake up at least 3 or 4 times a week thinking, fuck, what did I say? What did I do? Who did I abuse? Who did I let down? And I haven't had that in almost 3 years.
Such a gift, isn't it?
It is. So it's like if you're thinking about whether or not it's worth it, just that in and of itself, I think is like that's enough for me to not want to drink again.
Absolutely. Like if you're waking up and any of that regret or that shame or that remorse is showing up, then I think it's worth having a look at.
Now, Dani, support systems are really important in early recovery, in recovery in general, I think. I was recently just writing on this idea of, we know that connection is really, really important. And I know that when you started your sobriety journey with Ash, you guys had a WhatsApp group or something with a group of friends, didn't you, to help cheer each other on? So what did support look like for you in the early days, and what does it look like now?
Yeah, it's awesome. We had this group on WhatsApp called Club Sober, which we'd made. And so a couple of those people were musicians, and there was my other friend as well, who's also a musician. Yeah, and so we'd sort of support each other in that, like if someone was having a gig or someone was going to an event or a party or whatever, we'd sort of say, I'm going to go this night. I'm feeling like this. And, the other members would just be like barracking for you and saying, you can do it. I remember once I was in Margaret River. I was probably 6 months into my sobriety, and I was cooking. I was at this friend's place in Margaret River, wine territory, and I just got this hankering for Shiraz, and I'm just like, I couldn't shake it. I'm like, I'll just buy one to put in the cooking, because I was making pasta sauce. I'll go down there, and of course, like, what was I thinking? So I bought it, a $50 bottle, mind you, to go into a pasta sauce. Yeah, right. And opened it, smelt it, and I was like, fuck it, I think I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to drink. And I thought, before I do it, because we'd made this pact with each other, before any of us were going to drink, we've got to tell someone on the group. So I thought, all right, I'm going to message the group, because I was a bit unsure too. I didn't want to do it, but oh my God, the craving was so strong. And Scott, one of the group members, got back to me straight away, and he was just like, stop everything, go make yourself a fucking cup of tea, go sit down outside, take a few deep breaths, and see how you feel after the cup of tea. Don't drink it. And I was like, okay, all right. So I'll go and have a cup of tea and see how I feel. And I went down and sat down and had the cup of tea, and I came to my senses. Thank God I came to my senses. And everyone checked in at this point, like, are you okay? What's happening? And I was, happy enough to say, I got through it. And that support made all the difference. If I hadn't have reached out at that point, and if perhaps if he hadn't got back to me at that point, perhaps I would have had the drink. I don't know.
And in hindsight, that's become a pivotal sliding doors moment for your story, because like with the work you do now and the world that you're surrounded in, it wouldn't exist if you'd gone back to drinking after 6 months.
I know, it's so crazy. Do you know what? This morning I was down on the beach and I did a meditation. I was thinking about what I was grateful for, and I was imagining how life would look for me now if I hadn't stopped drinking, and where I'd be. Would I even be here? Would I be living here? I probably wouldn't, because I'd probably be divorced and have a serious cocaine addiction and broke. But yet here I am, and all these doors opened in a way that I never would have imagined. I never, ever in my wildest dreams would have thought I would be doing any of what I've ended up doing or studying or the people I work with. It's just such an honor, and I've got to pinch myself sometimes. And I think, wow, if I had have kept drinking, where the hell would I be? It's quite scary when you look at it, and it's sobering, pardon the pun. I do a thing tonight with my group, actually. It's so we do this at the start of each challenge group that I lead, where I take them through a meditation. It's like a timeline meditation where we project forward 5 years. Like, where would you be in 5 years' time if you're still drinking? How does that look? What does that person look like? How do they feel? Let's take it forward another 5 years. So 10 years. Where are you at that point if you were still drinking? And a lot of people end up in tears. Some people say I was looking at a coffin. I was looking at a grave with my name on it. Or, people would just be like, it was so frightening to see where I'd be in 10 years. And then we do the opposite. Okay, and then 5 years without drinking, how does that look? And then it's a completely different scenario. It's really amazing when you stop to think about it. I'd say if anyone's in the journey, or they've had a few years under their belt too, don't forget that. It's really good to stop and reflect, to think, where would I be at this point? Like, where would you be, Ash, if you hadn't stopped at this point 3 years ago? Like, where would you be right now? It's different for everyone, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a terrifying prospect, but a really powerful exercise.
It really is. Yeah.
And I love what you said just then about reaching out for support. The reach out is the really important part in that sentence, because I do think that people often will have support around them. I mean, some people won't, absolutely, I acknowledge that. But there's people that I can think of right now that are struggling, and the support is there, but the addiction is so strong in them, it's telling them to stay disconnected. It's telling them to stay apart from, and so they're not reaching out. And if you don't reach out, you can't get the help. So you need to take that contrary action, that first step.
It's so important. I've had people where that I've worked with, or people in the challenge groups, if they've gone and drunk, and we've always said to them, my friend Lyndall, who's in AA, she does a 12-step, she's amazing. I've known her since primary school. We make it really clear, before you drink, call us first. We won't even necessarily try and talk you out of it. We'll just hear, we'll just listen. And we love it if someone does ring, and then if someone's gone and drunk, I'll be like, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you ring? And they're like, because I know you would have talked me out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes people don't want to be talked out of it for whatever reason. Yeah, and that's okay too. Sometimes that has to happen in order to keep growing. We have to have some slip-ups perhaps for some people.
Now, Dani, I wanted to circle back to that moment in Bali. Have you had an opportunity to talk to Sunny and Aria yet? Or is that something that you will do later down the track to help them understand about that time in your life?
Yeah, I've definitely spoken with Sunny about it. I spoke to her the next day, actually, after it happened. I lied. First I said I had food poisoning, but then later on in the day I said, oh, look, actually, and I told her the truth, because I feel like they deserve that. And that was one thing too that kept me going that 12 months. They'd be like, you're not going to drink again, are you, Mum? Or Sunny particularly would be like, you're not going to drink. And then when we said to them, once we'd hit the 12 months, she was a bit nervous thinking that we were going to drink again. I was a bit nervous thinking that we were going to drink again. And when we told them that we weren't going to drink again, the relief on her face was amazing. And so we still talk about it often. And we talk about the effect alcohol would have on us, some of the things that she can remember, catching her dad peeing on a suitcase in a hotel, which I laugh at now. And we all kind of have a laugh about that now. But it enables you to have that conversation with them that, look, this is what it does. It makes you act in ways that aren't kind of cool. And it's good to be able to have that conversation and be honest with them. But I know they're super relieved. Both of them are relieved.
Yeah.
That they're drinking. Yeah.
Oh, of course. And how incredible that they get to grow up with two sober parents.
I know. And it's really cool for them to see that. And also with Ash's work, and I still perform a bit from time to time, where the kids can come to shows and be backstage at Blues Fest, for example, or, a big show that Ash might be playing, and the kids are able to see that you can be a performer. You don't have to be shit-faced. You can sit there and do a bit of yoga and meditation and drink your water and have your fruit platter before you go on stage, which I love that our kids get to see that. I'm so glad that they're not sort of seeing us backstage getting plastered with everyone,
Absolutely. It's a lot of the time it's monkey see, monkey do.
Totally. Absolutely.
Sounds like you've had some really powerful, positive shifts in a number of your different relationships, not just your intimate relationship with Ash, but your children and your friends. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And a family, like being able to be more real with my family members and just being an honest human being, trying to be as honest as I can and authentic as I can. I know that word gets thrown around a lot, the authenticity thing, but I think it's really important to be as honest and real as you can, particularly if you're in the public eye or you're in a public space. People are relying on you to be honest. And I think it's so important that it's not all freaking rainbows and unicorns. It's tough sometimes. Big emotions show up and they're tough. I had a big craving about a year ago. Oh, it was probably less than that. Oh, no, it was about a year ago after my dad passed away. Everything in me wanted to go to the bottle shop. Everything in me. I was just like, I don't want to feel this anymore. I'm sick of feeling this. And I didn't. I went and I responded in a different way. I got into bed, I curled up in a ball, and I just cried and got through it to the next day. And I was really honest with everyone about that and the people I coach, and because there's huge learning in it. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you're still having a craving here or there. It's honest. And you've got to be honest.
And often that can be, I know for me, I'll speak for myself, getting honest was something that I had to learn to do, because in my active addiction, my default was to be dishonest, and not even necessarily outwardly dishonest with other people, but dishonest with myself. The stories that I would play, the minimization, the delusion, like I was shrouded in dishonesty, and it took me a daily practice of getting honest with other people for that to then reprogram and become my default setting.
Even when you're being dishonest, you can feel when you're not being honest in your body. Like you can really feel it. It's quite present. And even if it's that you're saying yes when you kind of really want to say no, even that shows up in the body, and the body's going, you don't want to do that. Why are you saying yes to that? And so then it's taking a moment to be honest. If you can, it's not always so easy, but if you can have that compassion for yourself to say to that person, actually, I know you really want my help right now, or I know you'd like me to be there, but I just can't. I can't be there today, or, for whatever it is that's showing up for you. But being honest in so many ways.
Dani, what's something that you've learnt about yourself since you've become sober?
Oh, gee, so many things. Well, mainly that I like who I am, that mainly that I'm an okay person, that I'm not a bad person, that I can endure hard stuff, and I can endure big emotions when they show up, and discomfort. I never thought that I could sit in discomfort. I think that's what most addicts are trying to avoid, is discomfort. So being able to be present with discomfort rather than try and drink it away or eat it away or distract it away. That's probably been the biggest thing that I've learned about myself, actually, that I can be uncomfortable and it's okay.
And this too shall pass. That's the mantra that I play whenever I'm in those really uncomfortable, sticky feelings, just knowing that it'll pass and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dani, there's one final question that I love to finish on with my guests, and that is, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live a life today that is happy, joyous, and free?
Okay, self-care. Absolutely not negotiable. So even if stuff's crazy, I take time. I do like yoga nidra is really important for me to do at least four, if not 7 times a week. Time to myself. So if that's down on the beach, sunrise, just having some time to myself is absolutely non-negotiable. And gratitude is not negotiable. And love, snuggling up to my hubby, snuggling up to my kids, telling my friends that I love them. It's really important to me, and I think that's a non-negotiable as well. And then, of course, not drinking. That's not negotiable. I'm not drinking.
That's it, no matter what.
No matter what.
That sounds like a pretty good list to me. Dani, we say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one need suffer in silence. So I cannot thank you enough for being so generous with your time today, for joining us on the show and for sharing your story with us all.
Oh, thanks, Ash. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me on the show. And it's been an absolute honour. And I hope to get you on my show one day too.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Take care, Dani.
Thanks, Ash. Bye.
A big thank you for tuning in today. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button and leaving a review. Every review helps this podcast become more discoverable, meaning more people can hear these stories of strength and hope. Together, we will continue to remove the stigma around mental health, trauma, and addiction. Remember to reach out to those you care about, and I'll see you next time.